Welcome, everyone, to a conversation about a framework for the future. Thank you for being here. We're very excited for today's discussion, which will include examples from our partner network and plenty of time for questions at the end of the session. You can put your questions in the Q&A section, and as we go through the session, we will find time to answer them then or at the end of the session. And next slide, Katie. Whoop. Let me take a moment to introduce our team. I am Rachel Riggio. I am the Vice President of Technology Partnerships. And with me today, I have Katie Martin, our Chief Impact Officer, and Cesar Morales, our Director of Strategic Partnerships. Together, we work at Learner-Centered Collaborative, where we partner with schools and districts to make the shift to learner-centered education. And today, we're excited to share some of the ways we partner with our districts and schools in designing frameworks for the future. So I'm going to turn it over to Katie now to get us started.
Thanks, Rachel. We're going to jump in with a quick question. We always love to do a check-in. So wherever you are in the world, whatever your context, share in the chat for us, what are the skills necessary for students to thrive in an ever-evolving world? Take a minute, let's anchor on what is most important. What are the skills that we really want our young people to be developing? Problem solving, communication, adaptability, perseverance, know how to activate and use their own agency, advocacy, awesome, self-assessment, resourcefulness, leadership, teamwork, flexible thinkers, absolutely. I love that, Scott, knowing the power of their voice, innovation, great, determined learners, absolutely. Collaboration, communication, creativity, awesome. So thanks for sharing your hopes and dreams. They align with most of ours as we think about this work as well. I encourage you to keep sharing those and keep commenting. And as Rachel said, put comments and questions in the chat and we will address them as we can throughout the conversation, and we left time for it after as well. So based on what you all just said, the things that you really want for learners, we as educators, leaders, and as parents as well, really want those same things. So our vision at the Learner-Centered Collaborative is really an ecosystem that empowers all learners to know who they are, thrive in community, and actively engage in the world as their best selves. And so when we say this, we really think about how do we think about these aspirations we have, but how do we create education ecosystems that involves the schools, the communities, and coming together to really create the environment that allows learners to develop these skills that we all so desperately want them to have and need them to have in our evolving world. So based on this vision, based on really what we are aspiring to do in the world and our education ecosystems, the way we do this is think about we partnering with educators to define whole learner outcomes. That's how we're talking to you about today. But thinking about not only those outcomes, but really then how we design experiences that develop those outcomes and how we shift ecosystems to really think about, or in the enabling conditions in our ecosystems to really think about how we create those, how we leverage those experiences to develop those outcomes. And we are honored to do this with some of you who might be on the call already, our partner network of over 150 schools and systems. So we have states that we work with who are developing their profiles of learners at the state level. We have schools and districts, micro schools, charter schools, independent schools. And what we know is that it is not the type of school, but it is the mission and the vision and those outcomes that we aspire to, and the way we create those experiences that really impact the experiences that learners have and shape how they have the skills that they have and their trajectories in their future. So we're really excited to work with this network. We continue to learn and grow as we engage with these partners across the US, and who knows, maybe in Luxembourg too. So as we think about these partnerships, and I look at the skills that you all listed, I want to highlight that they align with what the World Economic Forum highlights. And we share this list often because when we think about our outcomes that we aspire to, many people talk about, we have to prepare kids for the future. We have to prepare kids and help them be successful. And we do. But when we're short-sighted thinking about for the next grade level or for college, we miss the bigger picture of the skills that they need to be thriving in our world, not just in school. So we think about the skills necessary for life, as many of you are thinking about as well. So I look at this: analytical thinking and innovation. Many of you highlighted that. Active learning and learning strategies, complex problem solving. So when we think about these skills as critical for young people to develop, we also know that as adults, we have to model and develop these skills as well. But it requires new and different experiences in our classrooms and our schools and communities to actually develop these skills. So our framework that we're going to be sharing with you today stems from these three pillars around whole learner outcomes, defining what it is that the community cares about. We know that it's contextual. We know that it's important for young people to have a voice. We know that the educators, leaders, community partners, families all need to come together to determine what those things are for your community and your context, and help pull those together, and then define those learning experiences that we'll share a little bit more. And of course, the enabling conditions. This is our framework that we start with as we partner with schools and districts and states to think about how this can help support and launch the framework for the future in each system. And so thinking about that, we're going to share some examples of what that looks like. But first, I want to highlight why we really focus on a framework for the future and how it's different than a graduate profile alone. It's really important to have that profile, but we believe the framework for the future really creates that North Star. So it is the investment of the community coming together to saying what it is that they hope for the young people in their community, creating that North Star, but defining those outcomes, aligning the experiences, and then really creating those success indicators that help people move towards actualizing that, not just creating a poster that will sit on the wall. And it's really a communication tool. It's really about aligning on those outcomes and helping people in the community understand what the objective is. I often say, tell a story of I walked into the superintendent's office in a district a while back. And I said, what do you want for young people? And he said, oh, critical thinkers, collaborators, innovators, all the things that we've just talked about. And I said, so how are you going to get there? What does it look like in the classroom to develop those skills? He said, well, I just know it when I see it. And we believe that if you go with that mentality that you just know it when you see it, it's hard to create a community that's moving toward that North Star together unless you put some stakes in the ground, identify it, and support resources and models to help people understand what it looks like. And so we really believe that it's a living document that helps communicate aspirations and helps people move toward their next steps. So we say it's not a binder, it's not a plan that sits on the shelf, it's really a tool to help move a community forward. So I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Cesar to talk about what becomes possible when you have a framework for the future.
Thank you, Katie, and thank you, Rachel, for kicking us off, and everybody who's in the audience. Something I want to underscore is the power of a framework for the future is that it's all encompassing, right? So an organization can have several tiers. The first tier is really having clarity on mission, vision, core values, guiding principles. That is a phenomenal start that honestly not all organizations have in place. Some organizations even take a step further and create a learner profile or a graduate profile, portrait of a graduate, whatever you want to call it. And that definitely raises the ante. Where I feel we add value in this process and what the framework for the future also encompasses is what are the learning experiences that we want to ensure take place in the organization? And that for me is what differentiates a framework for the future from just simply having a mission, vision, core values, and what have you. So when we start thinking about what's possible, I want to share you some examples of some illustrations that our partners have crafted. And the biggest thing that I want to highlight is that these are at the local level. The design takes place at the local level with and I'll get to this in a second, but with student voice, with parent perspective, with educator input, and with leadership participation. So this is crafted with many perspectives, and it tells a story about what's important for that particular community. So on the left-hand side, we have our partner Mesa Union, who on the inside has put together their learner outcomes, and on the exterior has defined the learning experiences they want to provide their students to ensure those learner outcomes. Then we have our partner to the right of that, we have Compass, and then also Allen County. But the biggest piece that I want to highlight, underscore, is the fact that this is all created by the community for the community as they define success for their learners. With regards to our theory of change, as I mentioned earlier, the starting point and the non-negotiable is clarity. Clarity of organizational mission, vision, core values, and guiding principles. And then from there, as Katie elevated, is how do we define success in the organization, which is where our learner profile comes in and where we start to really define success metrics for the example for the academic year or the strategic plan. Where the magic, I feel, really happens and where the change happens is in the learning model. And as that gets defined, working together internally to then scale it out, doing learning cycles, and really broadening the scope of adopting that learning model to get to those learner outcomes. The next slide will provide us a typical time frame to go from beginning to end of crafting and co-designing a framework for the future. And as I stated earlier, where we begin, and I know, Katie, when you do this, it is amazing the feedback that you get from students when you just ask 3 simple open-ended questions. A, what's working? What would you tell the educators, the principals, central office leaders that is really making an impact on the student experience? And students are brutally honest. They let you know. The second open-ended question is, what is not working? What is not leading to the learning that you feel is necessary for your success post that particular school district? Then the final one is, what is not happening that you really wish was happening inside of the learning experiences you have? And so when you bring those notes back to the adults who are going to design the whole learner outcomes, it is a pretty amazing experience. And like I said, Katie, I know you've done this as well, and we always walk away inspired because our young people, they know what they're striving towards, and they know what they need to be successful. So from the student forums, we then go into crafting the learner profile, and then morph into what are the learning experiences that we need to have day in and day out in an organization for our students to be successful. And then we conclude the process with defining success metrics that are linked to the whole learner outcomes, that are driven by the learning model, and that are connected to the mission, vision, core values of that particular organization. And the one thing that I do want to say is that when we connect and approach the work with our partners, we always set the desired outcomes ahead of time because each organization is different, right? We're here to design for that particular ecosystem. And so this right here is a sample partnership timeline, but there's always variations because there's no 2 places that are exactly the same. And so next, I believe, Rachel, you're gonna take an inventory of where some of our guests are with regards to this work of Framework for a Future.
Yes, I am going to launch the poll now. It should be there.
All right, so we have some people who are here to learn why we need a framework. That's great. We've started. We need to finish it. So as you guys are putting in your thoughts, we notice a lot. There's people will start at all different places. So this is not surprising. We've had lots of people said we've started this work and then it got lost in the pandemic, or we're coming out of the pandemic and now we know that we really need to think differently. Great. We've started. Now what? And even that's a small percentage of we need to finish. We have a profile, but we need success indicators. We need metrics. Definitely hear that and want to think about, okay, how do we just help make sure our educators, families, and everyone is invested and really understands why this work matters. Great. We have a few people still going. Most people are here to learn. Hope you are learning. Keep asking questions in the chat if there's more that we can answer. All right. Great. We are going to take a minute, given where you are, and we'd love to see what your questions are. Cesar just shared some examples of the framework, kind of the process. What are some questions that we can answer for you about where you get started? What does it look like? Or what are some examples? Post it in the chat. Let us know what your questions are. Yeah, you can post it in the chat. Thanks, Scott. That Scott just said, yeah. I can't wait to get started. I watch the Vita video once a week. I can't wait to get started. I love it. Okay, so Nancy is asking, what's guiding the way learning experiences are determined? Okay, so I think that this is asking, when we really work with educators around defining the learning experiences, this is a great question. We start with a variety of models, but really start with learning sciences. So what does the research say about how we learn best? What does the learning science say about our brains and what's important? So giving an overview of what that looks like. We also, as Scott highlighted, share videos and examples to get people thinking about what are the experiences that they want to see. So connecting back to, if we want critical thinkers and collaborators and problem solvers in our classroom, we have to give them opportunities to think about real world learning and solving problems that exist. We have to think about how these foundational skills that are absolutely critical can be applied in really authentic and meaningful context. So it's a combination of looking at the science, looking at examples, and intuitively thinking about the experiences that we know have worked best for us. And then I will say, at the Learner-Centered Collaborative, we have a framework that we help educators work from. Some have adapted it entirely because they say, oh, I like it, it makes sense. Some have shifted it. So we, our 4 core experiences that we comprise our learning model are personalized learning, competency-based, authentic, and inclusive and equitable. And so when we put those together, we really think about how that supports developing the desired outcomes. And part of that is, a lot of times we see systems that focus on personalized learning, and they're really focused on, and it's great, but they miss the application to the real world and that authentic context. And then we often see places where there's authentic project-based learning, but sometimes miss the personalized aspect of how to meet the needs of individuals in that system. So we believe it's not one or the other, but both together, leveraging technology to really support educators to meet the needs of each and every learner.
And Katie, I'd like to
please
reference Scott when you said you watch the Vita video once a week. And I can tell you that, knowing Dr. Shigala, and matter of fact, taking a school district to go visit his school tomorrow, the one thing he will say is that it happened as a result of various iterations. But in the end, it's finding clarity on the type of teaching and learning that the organization expects to take place. And then that then drives how the school uses their time, their resources, and their energy. So when there's a framework for the future, there's clarity, and then that leads to high impact practices. So just wanted to take an opportunity to catch that about Vita.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's 2 I want to come back to. So there's a question from that looks like Scott, but is actually Erica, that I want to come back to and address in a minute. But Darren asked in the Q&A, Utah has a portrait of a graduate, but it feels more like a localized effort, or am I off? So a little bit different, Darren. The portrait of a graduate absolutely is a important piece of it. And I know that Utah has done it at the state level, and working with the state level, they are hoping that individual districts take that process and create their own portrait. What we are talking about with the framework for the future is not exclusive, but it's inclusive of a portrait of a graduate, but it takes it to the next level, thinking about, okay, if we have the portrait, what is the learning that needs to happen? And what does that mean in our context, our system, so that people really feel like they have ownership over it? Because, you know, when sometimes it's just, we're taking this off the shelf, or this is a new initiative from the state, it doesn't feel localized. So part of this is understanding what it means in your school district, your community, and helping people understand, and often finding bright spots and making connections to work that's already being done. We don't believe that this is starting from scratch. We're often working with an asset-based lens of what's already working in your community. How do we build on that and do more of, like Cesar mentioned, talking to students, figuring out what's working, and let's hold on to that, right? And then the things that aren't working and aren't meeting those goals, figuring out how to do less of that. I want to jump to I think it's Erica's question. She says, we need a roadmap and how much it will cost and how much support's provided. So we can certainly do that. But we are in the middle of a middle school with a large district and expect a lot of pushback from others. So the question is always, how do we get others on board? It's a process, just like Cesar said, but part of this is, if we don't have that North Star, it's much harder. So we believe this is the first step to getting people on board. Having the vision clear about what those outcomes are, what those learning experiences are, it helps bring clarity to the system and start normalizing the same language with look-fors and examples, and helping people see again what's working and what's not. So of course there's pushback when people don't know how they fit into the system. And we believe that once we have this, then we start getting people to build on their own assets. What's working? How can we, and then what are their goals? So we also believe this is a personalized approach for educators, because they have to really identify their goals and their gaps aligned with the vision as well.
And
Cesar, would you add to that?
I would add to it. And there's also the idea that sometimes you just need to start, and you need to start small. And give yourself and your team permission to fail as you progress through this messy process, because it's not a clean cut process, but it does require the initiative to start, even if it's at the local level or at the school, at a department, and then begin to scale out, because it really is, it's about shifting mindsets. And to Laura Shields, there's always that accountability system, right? Either end of your state testing and what have you. And having been a high school principal at where we were under the microscope as far as testing, I would say that when we started to focus on the skills, the dispositions, the mindsets that we wanted our students to possess and our staff to model and exact, there's only one thing that naturally happens, and that's performance goes up, both for students and staff. And so you can't help but become a high performing team when you have clarity and when you focus on the day in, day out behaviors that you need to be a high performer.
Yeah. I love that Michael from Utah just put in the resources. Michael's here from the state of Utah. They've done incredible work to really support districts to take this on. I want to highlight a question from Mary Ellen Madden. She said, I'm with Scott and Erica, and I'm just concerned that the district already has a lot of expected initiatives. So how can a framework be integrated with programs such as SEL and DEI? So this is a great question. So I'll start, and I know Cesar has great insight too. This is inclusive of. right? So the framework for the future should be encompassing, I think of it as an umbrella, North Star of all the work that you're doing in a district. So if we get really clear on those outcomes, they are not in opposition of standards and achievements. They are beyond those, because, you know, a lot of times, and this might not sit super well with everyone, but shooting for, you know, doing well on a state test, frankly, is a pretty low bar that disengages many of our young people. So when we think about, you know, I did well on a standardized test, really we want to inspire people beyond that we're developing problem solvers, creative young people, innovators, communicators. That means they need to do well on those standards. They need to have the social emotional learning and the DEI work that is inclusive of the work and embedded into the learning model, not a separate thing. So a lot of times when we work with our partners on this, we'll say, let's talk about all the initiatives you have in the district. How do they align with these outcomes? If they don't, we need to talk about that. And if you have gaps, we need to look at some other resources. But it's not in addition to all of these programs, it's the umbrella that encompasses all of them, and pulls it together to be thinking about how we all work together to develop those desired outcomes.
And I would plus one in that it also helps organize. Sometimes we see initiatives as separate and apart, but when we really think deeply and find the connections of how they interlace with one another, I feel like a framework for the future helps simplify all of the work taking place. And then to Darren Beck's question, yeah, it really is about being mission focused, mission oriented. I always echo the thought of it's great when one decision can make many. So the more you are crystal clear on the direction you're headed, what you stand for, and how you define success, the more simplified the system gets.
Awesome. Alicia, I hope I said that right. Elisa has a great question. Loving these. She says, we have a locally created portrait of a graduate and its competency descriptors created. Awesome. Students are currently reflecting and receiving feedback on their interactions with growth opportunities. And we've defined in individual portfolios. All great work. Yet it seems that we're still disconnected in a real learning model shift. So if I'm reading this correctly, we have the profile, young people are learning it, but it's separate and apart from maybe what's happening day in and day out in the classroom. So this is not uncommon. And again, why we believe this framework for the future is an important step to really actualizing these outcomes. Because if we continue to teach in a more traditional school-centered model that we have, been part of for the last 100+ years, we continue to get those same outcomes. We continue to focus on narrow content, standardization. And so this learning model shift, defining it doesn't fix everything, but if we don't define it and really discuss what we want learning to look like, a lot of systems talk about an instructional model, and we frame a learning model because learning is really what we're after, right? It is about what the young people are learning and the experiences that they're having. So shifting the learning model, identifying it, allows you to revamp professional learning. It allows you to look at walkthroughs. We do a lot of learning walks. It allows you to have look-fors and talk about the experiences that young people are having connected to the profile. So it doesn't really shift, you're right, the learning experience until you really start to actualize that and make it part of the conversations you're having in your PLCs, in your staff meetings, in your feedback conversations, and how teachers are engaging in their own learning experiences as well. All right. We have, I think, time for one more question. I want to see if there's any that I missed. Cesar, was there one that you?
I think Lindsay Huntsman, the question is, there are a lot of players in this field. What sets learner-centered apart? I think in doing this work with our partners, and I would say it's doing this work alongside our partners. I think what differentiates learner-centered is that we initiate the work with trying to understand where our partners want to go. We don't show up with the menu of services and just say, here's the prescription of how we're going to go about this, but rather ask our partners, what is the identity that they're seeking to develop? And then we design accordingly. I mean, I look at, Katie, the many sessions that we have internally with trying to redesign what we're doing depending on the partner. And matter of fact, what I always think to myself is we're modeling the type of interactions we hope our educators are having in the field with regards to learning, relearning, designing, redesigning, but in the end, personalizing the experience for those we serve.
I love that. That makes me happy to hear that. I would also say, I appreciate this question, Lindsay. There are a lot of partners doing this work, and we love to be collaborative. Many of them are our friends. We learn together. But I think where we are coming from as educators, having done the work, Dr. Devin Vodichka, who is our CEO, was superintendent of Vista Unified, of course, where Vita, that's been mentioned a few times, has, done this work. Cesar, as a, school principal, led this work. We believe and have seen the power of this happen in our own systems as we've done this work as educators and consultants. And it's really for us about being where the kids are. A lot of times people don't want to work in school districts because they're hard and complicated. And that's where we love to be, because that's where the kids are. And so I think what sets us apart is that we are designing for schools and districts to really evolve, not necessarily create something entirely different, but we know that we have awesome educators and kids and leaders in our systems, and we want to partner and support them to do the work that they want to do and be their very best selves. Peter, I'll share the Vita video that's been mentioned a few times, and maybe Rachel can find it. Great. Thank you. Appreciate it. And we have lots of great videos. That's another piece of it, is like one of the things we love to do is share models from all around the country. Part of what makes us continue to learn and grow is to be able to work with partners and collaborate and share the awesome things that are happening around the country. Mm-hmm. All right. That was really fun. Really love the questions. Grateful for them. As we close out today, I just really want to anchor on this quote. It just gets me inspired often. The future is not ours to see, but ours to create. And as we think about all the questions and our outcomes that we were sharing at the beginning of this call or webinar, although Michael's here and I know he's from the state, I often say, like, the federal government, like the new version of education is not coming from outside. It has got to come from us as the educators, working together with families, with community members. It is upon us to make these shifts, and in partnership, think about the future that we want and how are we going to design them. We have an opportunity where people are starting to think about, with the chaos of COVID, think about what school really should be. And we really need to lean into that. So we deeply, deeply believe that it's possible. We know it is. It's happening. And we're excited to partner with educators and leaders and communities to really design the future that really creates the best opportunities for young people. And I said it, I'm a mom. I think about this all the time for my kids. This is what I want for my own kids. And if I want it for mine, I want it for all of ours, because it's an important that they have opportunities to develop their skills and be successful in our evolving world. So with that, I'm going to let you take it home, Cesar.
Yeah. So something that we straight out from the beginning with our partners is communicate and express that the process is messy, right? When we're putting together ideas of how we define success as a community and invite folks to the table and to that conversation, there are many ebbs and flows, right? It's emotional, but at the end of the day, it's real, it's pertinent to the community we're serving. And in the end, it's about driving what the community defines as success, and then defining the learning experiences that they want their children, their students to have in order to yield those whole learner outcomes. And so while it's messy, it's fruitful and it's enjoyable and it's meaningful. And so with that, we're going to close it out with Rachel.
Okay, so if you want to continue the conversation with Learner-Centered Collaborative, there's many ways for you to contact us. Those are on the screen now. I will go ahead and put the email in the chat or the QR code. You can grab that as well. And I am looking for the Vita video. I cannot find it, Katie, so.
I'll share it in an email. We'll share it
Perfect.
out. But
Perfect.
and it's probably on our website many places, but I'll definitely share that. And just want to say thanks again. Continue the conversation. If you have questions, something we didn't get to, want more examples, we are always here to connect and collaborate. So thanks for all you do. Thanks for being invested in this work and doing great things for kids.
Thank you.
Have a great afternoon.
Thanks, everyone.